sometimes we make things too complicated, right? We're hearing these stories. Maybe the story is somebody travels to Hawaii, or you travel across the globe to come to the US. And, it can be as simple as a smile with the cashier on the supermarket and just wait what comes in return, or reaching out with a helping hand. Just be curious what people like truly be curious what is in people's mind and how do they feel today. And I know everybody heard these stories and all that, but it's actually fun. Like, I don't say do it every day. We all are. I mean, I'm grouchy too at times, and I'm not interested sometimes in interacting with people. And I think that's totally human. And at the same time, it's just beautiful sometimes. I love these situations when I have expected them the least, right? So you don't expect to have a great conversation maybe on the fruit shelf of the supermarket, but sometimes you have if you just make that first step. And I don't know, at least that's for me. It can be, we can travel to India and we can go to places very far, but many of those things are really in our neighborhood. And it's the invitation, I think, to just be curious and listen to that voice and follow it and allow it to just, experience something new today.
Julius, welcome to Empathy Led. How are you, my friend?
Nice to meet you. I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor. You're one of the few people, I always can't wait to have our next conversation. So I'm really looking forward for this one. Thank you for having me.
Of course, the feeling is genuinely reciprocated. I feel like after every conversation, I always leave either inspired or more intelligent than I was before our conversation. So there's no doubt that it will be much of the same for this one.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. So I've always found that, or at least I'm very fascinated by the part of people's lives that they choose to stitch together to tell a coherent story about themselves when asked to introduce themselves or asked about the story. So have you been able to reflect on the pieces of your life puzzle that give people the best context about who you are and the person you have become?
It's first of all, I feel it's a good and refreshing question. So it goes beyond the general, let's introduce yourself, and you would go by age and your profession. So for me, I would start very early, which probably is school, first years of school. Should I also always just give you the reason why, or let me picture, should I just throw out these words? How do you like it?
It's your show. Just run with it. Whatever feels natural and intuitive. Yes. That's the route I want you to take.
So definitely school, because it manifested the feeling of not being seen by the general eye of normality. One of my favorite examples is that, for example, I wasn't baptized, and my parents thought, it's my choice. It should be my choice, whatever religion I chose. But at this time, at age, our regional school, they didn't have an alternative. So you either had to go in a Catholic class or in a what we call evangelisch. So I'm assuming it's kind of like a Baptist church style, teaching of religion. So I chose that, and I always questioned. That was something that I did when I was really young. And I really annoyed teachers by doing that, because specifically in religion class, I believe they just wanted me to believe whatever they say. And I was just really curious, well, how did Jesus actually do that? Or how did this story came together? So I ended up being thrown out of the class and was not allowed anymore to join religion. But that's definitely a highlight in my life, the journey of school and the feeling of not being seen, or that the type of curiosity that I had as a young child was actually not appreciated by the system. The second was absolutely the choice of becoming self-employed. So I founded my first company at the age of 21.
Wow.
At this time, I started out in the sports and event, in the sports and event scene. I did parties, and my brother was a professional snowboarder. And I had the opportunity to work for different snowboard companies. And why I think that was pretty much a highlight, because it was the ground and the foundation of entrepreneurship, taking life in my own hands and being tired of waiting until my surrounding is accepting me for my creative ideas, or some call them stupid ideas and some call them creative ideas, but for my ideas, and just take responsibility, be accountable for my own destiny. So I would say that's definitely the second. And the third is my first travel to Hawaii. I was fortunate enough. So I was fortunate and unfortunate. I was fortunate that I had the ability to do it, to leave my job for 3 months. The reason why I left for 3 months was the unfortunate part. I experienced something like a burnout in my mid-20s, and the question of who I am and why I'm here, it was really emptied me. So I chose traveling to Hawaii, and I met beautiful people that I'm still connected, until today. But that moment or that time there really opened up my horizon in the perspective of life, in the perspective of us as human beings, the perspective on living together, the possibility of like very, very philosophical and spiritual questions. So that travel is monumental, because it literally was the fuel for everything that came after. But I would say these three things in a combination: the experience of not being seen and not being part of a system; the second, taking accountability and trusting in entrepreneurship; and the third one, the spiritual addition, that what is it all worth if there's no purpose in life?
Oh, I absolutely love that. I have a comment and a follow-up question. So I always feel within myself that I'm not what some might call a purebred entrepreneur. And as I was listening to you, it dawned on me that, at least from my vantage point, maybe you don't feel the same, but from my vantage point, you are a purebred entrepreneur, somebody whose curiosity that's as far back as he can remember, and somebody who was always comfortable challenging the norms and questioning reality, and pushing and working with the boundaries of what reality was. I think those are fundamental elements, I think, that are required to be an entrepreneur: somebody who sees things that others don't see, somebody who is brave enough to question the norms and to imagine a different version of reality. And it sounds, with the blessings of your parents, that's something that you've been doing for a very, very long time. And that, for me, is fairly new, because I was raised, and I was for a long time, the perfect citizen, somebody who was trained to fit in and to follow the rules and to do exactly how it is told. So that's I love that background. So my follow-up question was for Hawaii. So can you tell us a little bit more? It's clear that that moment and that trip was such a deeply transformational trip. So I want to learn a little bit more about that trip and all the ways in which it opened your worldview, and some of the lessons that you've learned and are taking with you now.
Yeah, it's really difficult to summarize it. It's so I think the first experience, here's me. So maybe kind of like to go a little backwards in what you just said. I wouldn't say I had the blessing of my parents. So both of my parents are teachers, or I'm surrounded by teachers. So the academic path would have definitely been the one that was preferred, because I stopped going to school after 10th grade.
Oh, wow.
So I'm definitely not, I wasn't blessed by them, or that was not the choice that they would have had, for me in their life plan. That just as a side comment. And also, I think to your understanding of entrepreneurship, I want to agree with you. And I think there's a misconception out there that all entrepreneurs are just looking for the next exit. So I think there's still true entrepreneurs out there who are just truly curious to changing the status quo in whatever category that is. And I would definitely probably count myself on that side. So going back to Hawaii, so I never had the opportunity, let's start with the language itself, right? So I'm born and raised in Germany. I had, of course, English in school, but the most I could say was, where's the swimming hall, or can I order a cup of coffee? So that's the type of English that that I remembered. So going by myself, so I did go by myself into a country that I hardly, I spoke the language, but it's just not like really good enough. And then being in an area that I have no clue, like I had no idea why I chose Hawaii. Literally, it was just like, well, I had the opportunity. I knew I had to go somewhere, but I hadn't really figured out why. And so that itself is such a transformative, experience. If you and you know that from own experience, if you be in a place where you don't know anybody, you be kind of like even like outside of their cultural context. And then you have to find your path, whatever that is. And so for me, that finding my path at first started by doing a lot of activities, because that's what we're used to, right? So we're distracting ourselves. We are like doing the hack, like site visits after site visits, and we're driving around, etc., etc. The good thing on an island is, or on islands, there's only so much thing you can do. So like your drive ends, like it's like physics, right? So you can't go further than that. So the next stage of my trip was, I was bored like hell. I literally was so bored. Like I had no idea what to do. It was so desperate. I remember that I woke up always in the morning and I didn't know what to do. And I started to going to this French influenced restaurant. They had crepe and a good coffee, which I appreciated. But they're open at 8:30. So I would sit there an hour earlier because I didn't know what to do in front of that restaurant until they're opening up. So, but it literally was like a life lesson. I tell people, experience being bored, experience don't know what to do with yourself, and hang in there, because behind that journey there's light, and that's where the good stuff is waiting for you. So for me it was starting, I started experiencing some writing, creative writing, own writing. I wrote a children book at this time already, things that I just reflected on my own. So that was definitely the one side why that travel was really inspirational. But of course, the other side was the meeting of people. So I for whatever reason, right? So you be just open. You literally wake up in the morning and you don't know where you go. I would take hitchhikers. Those hitchhikers needed to go to a place, and I would just join them because I had nothing else to do. And while doing that, while following that flow or accepting that flow, I would meet great people, like, for example, spiritual leader, cultural ambassadors. I was suddenly invited to events, to local celebrations. I would be invited to spiritual gatherings. I did Sufi dancing. I went to a Catholic church, whatever Sunday preach. I went to a gospel choir. I went to a Buddhistic temple. I did Tibetan chants and whatever, because I just followed whatever, and that was so beautiful on these islands, that there were so many opportunities. But that experience and the understanding how much diversity, how much color, how much there's out in this world really transformed me into looking at life just differently and saying there must be more, and what is that more for me, and who am I actually in the first place in the context of this entire surrounding. So it all started for me in Hawaii, and after that trip, I went back at least once or twice a year. I mean, you know my story. Then eventually I met my wife there, which I'm married now for 12 years, and the rest is history, so to say.
Yeah. No, I completely, to your point earlier, I can completely relate to being in a new environment. And for me, as I reflect on that, I reflect on that experience and connect it to where this fascination for empathy comes from. I think that experience is central to that. When you move into a new environment and all of a sudden, all the traditional markers you used to use to connect with and engage with other people are no longer relevant, you are forced to find a new way to connect and to relate to other people. And in
Yeah.
that, you are forced to flex your empathy muscle and to find points of connection that are more fundamental to the human experience and transcend the superficial social markers that we typically use to relate and connect to other people. And for me, it just like it was for you, it has been a deeply transformational experience. And as I talk to people all the time and encourage them to flex their empathy muscle, one of the ways that I always encourage them to do that is to transcend the boundaries, right? Is to go beyond the boundaries. And of course, the easiest way to do that is to travel, is to go meet different people and different culture. But it also means in our digital world where we are in our own echo chambers, it just means also that you have to transcend the boundaries of your reality and look to find new information and ideas that might challenge your point of view, so that you can continue to flex that empathy muscle. So I completely relate to that idea of being in a new environment and having to find new ways to connect with people.
And I want to add to that because I think sometimes we make things too complicated, right? We're hearing these stories. Maybe the story is somebody travels to Hawaii or you travel across the globe to come to the US. And, it can be as simple as a smile with the cashier on the supermarket and just wait what comes in return, or reaching out with a helping hand. Just be curious what people like truly be curious what is in people's mind and how do they feel today. And I know everybody heard these stories and all that, but it's actually fun. Like, I don't say do it every day. We all are. I mean, I'm grouchy too at times, and I'm not interested sometimes in interacting with people. And I think that's totally human. And at the same time, it's just beautiful sometimes. I love these situations when I have expected them the least, right? So you don't expect to have a great conversation maybe on the fruit shelf of the supermarket, but sometimes you have if you just make that first step. And I don't know, at least that's for me. It can be, we can travel to India and we can go to places very far, but many of those things are really in our neighborhood. And it's the invitation, I think, to just be curious and listen to that voice and follow it and allow it to just, experience something new today.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. So I can't exactly remember even how we got connected or how we met, but I do remember our first conversation, and I was so fascinated by how different and even spiritual, if I could say, your approach to branding, to marketing, and even entrepreneurship in general was. And there was something uh, deeply attractive to that, because I felt within myself that my own spiritual journey bled into the way I think about business and the way I think about branding. And I didn't always find that echoed or reciprocated in my interaction with peers. And then I found you, and it was so obvious that in the words that you chose, in the way you were thinking about it, that we were very much connected in that way, and many more. So I want you to talk and share with the audience this philosophy or framework, if I will, that you built with your agency Aina at the time, called IBB. Like, what is it? What is the idea, and how did that come to be? And give us a little bit of context around this, what I think is a very new, refreshing, and different approach to branding and marketing.
Yeah, I think it also came down to, or came back to, the experience that I had on my own, as I shared earlier, that I went through this transformative path from, lack of health, experiencing or opening up to different experiences. And then I'm like somehow found these answers that I was looking for, which translated into a deeper sense of purpose and connectiveness between what I'm doing and kind of like the contribution that I do for this world, right? And at this time, I was heavily involved in advertisement. So my job was to help bigger companies. I did work for Microsoft or automotive companies, beer companies, these type of things, and they're all beautiful companies. But sometimes you question, well, who is it good for, right? So whether or not I'm selling, like somebody downloads another messenger, or somebody buys this type of beer or that type of beer, or somebody buys that type of car versus the other type of car. So it didn't answer necessarily some of those questions that I had. So I guess when I looked in my profession, there's a thing, there's all these words that we are using, right? We're using marketing, and then we have advertisement, and then we have branding. And the first time that I interacted with branding, that was something that I got kind of hooked. It was interesting to me because these branders, they could ask different questions that we advertisers would ask. And I was really interested by them because they were more fundamental, and they were much more scientific even, or psychologically advanced even, if you want to say, because it was about how do we create personality around a product so that personality then can connect with our target group, or the prospective target group. So somehow suddenly there was something in human word that would be called a relationship. And that definitely fascinated me. And so to bring these things together, what I experienced on my own was when I understood myself better, I suddenly met different people in my life that felt more enriching to my life, and I felt more enriched in life in general as well. So there was something to the spiritual component of understanding, like for me, and I really want to make that maybe quickly clear here for the audience. So when I talk about spirituality, it's not religion. I'm not going into any type of judgment of what you believe in or not. It's more, I'm referring to a deeper feeling that connects me with myself and my surrounding, which is that life that I'm living. And so I was curious and ask myself the question, if I can experience something like this as an individual, how can I make that experience available for others, or even companies, or even brands? And that was the starting point of my investigation for what I called later identity build branding. So the fundamental mindset was that if a brand is about building a relationship, why am I not humanizing it in the same way as I would, interact with any other human being? So I'm focusing on these intrinsic parameters that builds a characteristic, form and shape them in an authentic way, which comes from the true purpose of a company and why a company exists in the first place. And then reaching out to target groups and to customers, or to internal, like to employees, to stakeholders, to make that in kind of like a spider web of interconnectedness. That was the idea. So to build brands that are, they are more than just a sales pitch, that are actually able to connect, which means they have to have values, they have to have a purpose. And I even dislike saying that because we hear values and purpose a lot being thrown around as well. So I'm not just talking about, those things that are written down in a strategy workshop. It is something that you can actually honor. Like, let's say if you be a decent company, how would that decency be experienced by your consumers or by your employees? So it has to be a living source, something that is truly there. And it's not just a word that a marketing department thought is funky or would attract people. So something authentic that goes beyond the pure business purpose. I think that was my motivation of identity build branding.
Yeah, I love that. I stumbled upon this post a few years ago, maybe last year or a couple of years ago, that was trying to make this distinction between being purpose driven and the companies that are purpose signaling, right? Like we now understand with the changes in consumer behavior and expectation that it pays, quote unquote, to appear to have a purpose and to have these values. And as a result of that, there is a whole lot of signaling that is taking place within our industry and in marketing. But what I hear you say is this other more fundamental, truer, more authentic purpose built within the company. And that at times, because it is part of the DNA, doesn't even have to be expressed explicitly to the outside world, because it's a way of living within the company that finds expression in naturally everything the company does. The way he treats his employees, the culture he builds, the way he builds his product or services, the way he communicates. It's just, to your point, a living, breathing organism that doesn't need to be necessarily promoted or signaled to the world, because the people that need to find it naturally find it and connect to it.
Exactly. I think that there's this idea that I always used it as an example. When you go to a party, it's fascinating that you usually meet, or those who you have a conversation with, you usually have something in common. And so there's this magnetic field that connects you with those that you have something in common. So I believe brands can interact in the same way. But to do so, everything you create, whether it's your product, your levels of experience, when I mean level of experience, it could be customer service, it could be your internal culture, it could be how you treat your stakeholders, whatever it is, has to be authentically lived through these layers of, characteristic, of personality. And that's where most companies entirely fail. I mean, you maybe, I'm not sure how many brand strategists will listen to the podcast, but we all have done these workshops. We all have sit down and said, okay, let's create a brand identity or brand personality for you, dear customer. And then we wrote down 4 values. Have you ever asked yourself why we always write down 4 values? I mean, why are we not writing down 7, 8, 9, 2, 1? I don't know. It's always, most of the time it's 4. 90% of all strategies have 4 values. I don't know why. Do you? I'm serious the question. I don't know why we always have.
No, I mean, I think it's in the name of brevity, it's in the name of focus, because the idea is that the more we give people, the likelihood of those things being expressed decreases the bigger they are. But if we give them 2, 3, 4, then the likelihood of those things actually being lived through and lived by increases. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah. So personally, I have not figured it out, to be honest. I think it just looks good. I came to the conclusion it just looks good on a PowerPoint, because 4 pillars, it just really fits good on that slide. 8 would be just way too big. My point is with that is that, if you define a human, I mean, if I would define you, I can definitely find more than 4 values, and that's good. So, and then there's these other things that you have all these different roles, right? If you'd probably talk with your family, they would probably characterize you differently than with your business partners. So why can't brands that naturally being as well? Because aren't we are a conglomerate of human beings, which is extremely tricky in the first place, right? We try to make that one, but we are made of hundreds of different identities. So that organization, if we try to force that, which branding many times does, at least in my opinion, nothing authentic can come out. But if we give it space and we just give parameter, you mentioned the word organism, it's a word that I like to use as well, because an organism has a purpose. Like your human body has a purpose. Like nature designed you to fulfill a certain movement. So you're able to breathe. There's, you can digest. So there are things like there are functional meanings of your physical presence. But then inside that, there's this infinite interconnectiveness of information that pretty naturally flow and be interwoven. And I think brands and consumers, we can interact in a similar sense. And that's what I was very, very curious with IBB. And I'm still curious about that, with all the work that I do. It's always the question of how can that experience be more human? How can that be more authentic? And anyway.
So, as you know, I'm sure there is a segment within the marketing world that says that at times as marketers, we are we are making brands, we are trying to make brands more human and more personal and give it this kind of human qualities to essentially tickle and satisfy our own ideas and our own sense of self, but that in reality, customers don't really have relationship with brands as much as we wish they had. They don't. They just go through their lives and they don't have relationship with brand. Like, how do you receive that kind of where do you stand on that conversation? Essentially, what's your point of view in that?
I think my first answer is, well, what is a relationship in the first place? Like, if the expectation is that we have sex, then no, it's true, but probably not. I wouldn't expect that. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
So if that's our understanding, if it's intimacy by bodies touching each other, no. If relationship means we are enriching each other's life, yes. Why not?
Yeah.
Because you buy a product that has true meaning and uplifts something in your life, then we have a relationship, because I have done something great for you and you have done something great for me, my company, because you purchased my product. So that purchase becomes more than just a financial transaction, because it comes with the understanding that me as the company, I did something based on my mindset with my people that I believe, maybe from own experience or whatever, that I think enriches other people's lives. And you as the customer came across that obstacle in your personal life or professional life, and you purchase it to come out enriched or better or improved or whatever the intention was. And so that to me is a relationship, because relationships are also on a human level. We have it to transform each other, to grow, to become a better person, because if not, there wouldn't be any reasons to be in a relationship. It's, if you don't want to grow, don't go in a relationship, be by yourself. That's definitely much more comfortable, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when I first heard you talk about branding and marketing, I naturally felt connected and in sync with the way you were thinking about it and approaching it. So,
maybe one word on that, Junior. I think right now, with a little bit of distance to that industry, since I don't really do it anymore in the same way that I have done it in the past. I think we all should be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to all these things. I don't think it's always necessary. I think the most important thing for every company is to understand, why am I doing what I'm doing in the first place? And if you can't answer that question, then don't do it. Like, if you don't like to build a product, then don't build a product. If you don't like to enrich somebody else's life, then don't. Then do something different. And but if I feel like it becomes such a push, or I don't even know I don't even find the right word. It becomes so artificial to make everything so perfect and so hyper and so overstimulated, and branding, marketing, all these disciplines become so, everything is so hyper. I mean, there's nobody who says, I help you, be normal. There's always, they all say we help you to be extraordinary. But there's this little song that I can say as a German, but you know what I'm saying. Like, and there's somehow, I sometimes wish that we would just breathe a little and just do the natural thing. Stop. Like, education is great, and I think, maybe I had an advantage that I didn't go to a university. I'm saying, it's great to go to university. But the good thing of not going and not knowing was that I didn't even have these concepts. So for me to do something that is just natural, that's human sense, that was the only logic that I knew. And that's what I sometimes miss when it comes to branding and marketing. It's the human sense. Like, just be a little bit normal. That's totally fine. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So I didn't know in all our conversation that one of the things that triggered the trip to Hawaii was you experiencing burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So does building more right now, your newest venture, Is that a full circle moment that is informed by that experience?
It's definitely formed by all experiences. I felt when I decided to found MUA that it's the totality of all experiences, because it has a little bit of identity build branding. It has a little bit of all the experience that I had as a marketer and brander, and of course it has the spiritual experience and the health experience that I had, for myself. So I can speak from own experience, and I can use tools and mechanisms that benefited me, that are all somehow now involved into MUA. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, the audience now for the past 3 minutes have heard us mention MOA, and nobody was given context about what MOA is. So can you tell the audience a little bit about MOA, and what is the contribution that you seek to make in the world with this newest venture?
Yeah, MOA is a software as a service, where the intention is to raise resilience and adaptability of teams using what we say the power of mindfulness. So that in a nutshell is what MOA is. That's our catchphrase. So now we can unfold that.
Please.
Currently, yeah, we started actually as a journal company. It's the idea was, how do I bring mindfulness into a scalable corporate world? Because for me, the exercise of mindfulness, the understanding of who I am, was very essential through my own journey, and that was somehow that somehow was a driver to me when I created MOA. Like, how do I make that? But how do I make that scalable? So that was really important to me. Why was it important to me? And that goes also back to my early 20s. I truly believe business can make real change in this world. And that's what I'm passionate about it. I don't believe that government will, but I believe business will. So the importance of employees and the importance of people in that context of business was always something that I was very passionate. And somehow the way I worked with branding included that in a way. So MOA now just lifts it up on a different scale. So companies can onboard our software, and the main essential differentiator to other softwares in that space, most of them will be called what they say employee engagement softwares. It's kind of like survey-based softwares where companies ask for feedback from their employees, and then that feedback should lead to change within their culture, processes, workflows, etc. We do it a little different. Our program starts by the employee, in retrospective, reflects on all their daily activities. So you log into our software not to plan your day or to manage your tasks. You log into our software to write down what you have done in the previous 3 hours, and then you reflect on them with the question, how did I feel having the conversation with Junior? How did I feel having that client pitch? How did I feel having my morning cup of coffee? And then we use 3 symbols: a heart, which stands for everything that is energizing; a flame stands for everything that takes energy away. It comes from burnout, not lit up; and a line stands for neutrality. So these 2 components, what have I done, the question of how did I feel, and now using symbolism to get access to your emotional kind of like parameters or framework, that's kind of like the core of what MOA does. What's beautiful in that, over time, the employee learns to become more and more diverse, understanding the nuances of an emotion. So the trick or the goal is, for example, today you would ask an employee and say, how do you feel? And that employee would say, I'm overwhelmed. I hate everything I do. Using MOA, the intention is that the employee says, I'm overwhelmed because I have to do X, Y, Z in these circumstances, and that really takes my energy away. And that's the trick to real change. If you have people who have self-awareness, which is the understanding of themselves and their emotions in these circumstances and the environments they're in at, then you can actually use that to build a culture that truly reflects their people's being, their people's health. You can do changes around them. You can communicate better, because communication starts when two sides know what they want and what's good for them. But if you have communication, which in most companies is the case, that is kind of like built top down, an employee doesn't really know what to answer, leadership doesn't really know how to ask a question. So it creates rather conflicts than anything, than any solution, so to say. And then, of course, we have beautiful analytics, we have digital journaling. So we're really setting on reflection, retrospective. So it's a good tool. I use it, of course, myself. I recommend it in all sizes, companies of all sizes. And retrospective is powerful. And I really hope more and more companies, at least give it a try and see if it could help and benefit their company culture.
I love how simple the idea of the flame, the heart, and the bar is, and just how intuitive and easy to people it is. I love this idea of self-awareness, reflection, because I've found from my personal experience that self-awareness was the first step to empathy. I realized and recognized that the more and the deeper I understood myself, the more I could see and hear myself in other people. And then the idea of reflection is really where wisdom is acquired, that we can go through the same experiences over and over again without really changing anything. But the moment we reflect on experience, it provides us the opportunity to do something differently the next time.
Like, it's very impactful to help and improve. It's also about change, because we believe most of companies have to go through drastic change based on the environment and how the world is transforming in general. So how do you manage change? How do you cultivate change? And how do you even know if your people are ready for change? And these are all topics where MUA can give really great insights, and is a tool that can kind of like help you guide your people through it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that between having to navigate the pandemic, which I'm sure leaders thought would be the hardest part, it seems that navigating the post-pandemic world might actually be harder than managing the pandemic as well, because this expectation of going back to business as usual is definitely not the case. So leaders are now being challenged to rethink and think again about work and some of the things that they took for granted and accepted as immutable elements of a working life. So as a leader and somebody who works with leaders all the time, I'm sure you are often asked for your advice from maybe friends and peers in leadership role. Like, what do you typically say to a leader who is navigating and managing these drastic and seismic changes in the workplace?
Well, first of all, I really learned that change is hard, to be honest, because before, a couple of years ago, I would give you the whole context of behind the hard work, the opportunities for something better and more brighter and all this stuff. I don't do that anymore. Not that it isn't true, but it is actually really hard. And that's the reality for those who experience change, because that's just what it's just what it is. Like, the human beings just don't like to change, like, generally speaking. So to face that reality, that it's not going to be like something very easy and just effortless and everybody says yay, finally we do something new. I think it's very important. I'm not trying to scare people, but at least I'm trying to give them some form of reality, what to expect. And I think the other part is to, first of all, believe and understand what you want in the first place. So I experience change become much more impactful if leadership knows why they want to do change, what they want to change, and where they want to go. And they start implementing these processes by themselves first. And they don't do change as an executional kind of like, you guys have to change because that's where we want. So if they disconnect themselves from the process, that's when I experience usually a disconnect in acceptance as well from the people. And then usually that change becomes very difficult when not impossible. So those are the two main advices, and everything else to me is very much based on the individual circumstances. Some people would say you have to give gratifications for your people to do something. I don't believe in that. I mean, that can be true, but it fixes all kind of solution. And that's the tricky part with change, right? So it's just not, there is not a 1 to 5 step that you can just adapt and then you be good. It's very customized. So when we work with MUA and our clients, it's a very customized approach at time. Like, we do culture sessions and we do look at their results, and then we're trying to understand, well, what do you guys actually want, and what is the feedback that your people actually are giving you here? Like, where's the disconnect, and how can we connect them, and how can we involve them by asking different questions? How can we make sure that you be accountable for what they're asking you to do? So there's so much that needs to be considered, that it becomes it's just a super complex. It's just super complex. I'm sorry for giving you a little stubborn here in my answer. So, but those are the two things I would say. A, again, to summarize, it's actually pretty hard. And B, you have to make sure that you want to make that change yourself, and that you know why you want to do the change in the first place. And then I think you have a pretty good setup in starting a process.
Yeah, no, I love that. We are unfortunately coming to the end of our conversation. It is so obvious how much the through line, at least from my vantage point, that stitches together your different venture is this effort to infuse a little bit more humanity in this business world that at times seems to lack a level of humanity, or seems to lack soul, right? Like our mission at Griot is to help companies find their soul. That's our mission / tagline, and it's really this idea of helping them find the truest expression of who they are and the contribution they want to make in the world. And I think in that we are very much aligned. And
yes,
as I've mentioned before, I've really seen you a kindred spirit, and somebody from whom I've learned a great deal and continue to learn every day. So thank you so much for making the time to be on the show, and thank you so much for your multiple contribution to the world.
Thank you, Jim. Likewise, it's a pleasure talking with you, being your friend, and being on your show. Thank you so much.